Good evening, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for being here on time. We would like to begin on time so we can move ahead because so far we've been just getting through the introduction. So, what I want to do is, especially as we begin Kabbalah, every week at the beginning of the class, to give you a 1 or 2 sentences of a summary of what's the most important component that we studied in the previous week. Last week, we studied the cover page with pretty much, we didn't even study the approbations. And I explained that last week we went through that the rabbi did not want to name the book, but only a collection of letters. He was very humble. In addition, we also discovered 2 more points. One, which is the entire book is based on a verse in the book of Deuteronomy in which Moshe tells the Jewish people on behalf of God, it is close to you in your heart, in your mind, and to do it. In other words, whatever God is asking from us should be, and the purpose for which we are created, must be doable. And at many times we can ask, how is it possible? I can't afford it. My parents didn't raise me up this way. I had bad friends. There are many, many reasons for failing. The rabbi is going to try and help us achieve life's goals and God's mission in an easy way. The last point we study that's important to garner from last week is that there are 2 paths, the long and short one and the short and long one. I have shared with you briefly, and we will get to it on many occasions. The long and short one is physically long. You got to walk a long way. However, it's a very clear path. There are no potholes, there are no weeds, there are no tree stumps. You just walk. You will have to walk a long time, but you will reach your destination. It's a long and short way because if you are set to walk that path, you will get there guaranteed. The second path, in addition, once you reach that destination, you're there. In other words, once you make that switch, you get used to it. It's going to be a long path, and that's what we're going to be doing. You reach that point, it's going to be a lot easier to maintain that level of lifestyle. The second path is a short and long one. It's also a legitimate path. You can take a shortcut, but you'll have to jump through the hoops of fences and barking dogs and a river and many, many other difficulties, but you'll get there much faster. The problem with the short and long way is that it will help so I call it temporarily, but we call it for a short period. And to maintain it, you will have to take that path over and over again. Some call it the difference between Tzadik and Baal Teshuva. Over time, as we study, you will get familiarized with many terms in Judaism that are basic. And unfortunately, not everybody here in town is familiar, so I'll use them so that you get used to them. A Tzadik is a righteous man. Baal Teshuva is a penitent, someone who have made a switch and became observant. In this context, it's not about observing, it's about being close to God. Someone who made the turn and connected to God. That's called Baal Teshuva. You have 2 types of people. You have a righteous man who was born that way. We call it the short and long way, because when they face challenge, they will need, hi, welcome. They will constantly need to fight over and over. Then you have a Baal Teshuva, someone whose life was filled with misbehaving, a very difficult life, never got in touch with himself and God. However, by the time they realize that there is a purpose for life and there is a path, they take that path and that's the path they will stick with forever. It will never change. That's why the Talmud teaches us that the someone who repents is on a much greater level than the Tzadik, than someone who never strayed away. And the reason, as Chabad, we will get to it, it is because that person, when he took the route to reconnect to himself, it took a very long path, and it's a very slow period, a slow process, and therefore by the time they reach that point, there is almost guaranteed that they'll never fail. They'll never go back. Another way of explaining yes. The tzaddik is short and long. Short meaning they reach their destination very quick, but they need to refire constantly. By the way, this is the way righteous as we know it. As soon as we study the first chapter of Tanya, we'll discover that tzaddik, righteous, is a whole different ballgame. The third way of explaining short, long way and long and short way is in the Hasidic terminology. It's basic. It's one of the basic teachings or philosophy. But for some people who are not familiar with Kabbalah, it may be something new. And that is, there are two ways to relate to God, myself and others. One is through emotions and the other is through the brain. Let's explain. I can connect to my spouse. I can connect to my children. I can connect to a partner. I can connect to God through emotions. It makes me feel good. I care about them. I like to help people. I want to show them how successful I am, and I want them to enjoy and benefit from my goods. That's called the emotional connection. Then there is another connection, which is the philosophy, the brains. Using my brain, because it's the right thing to have a partner in life. That's the right thing to have my children respect me, so I am up before them and I wake them up instead of they waking me up. That it's the right thing for me to be honest with my partner or my employees or my clients, etc. Using your brains is called the long, short way. In other words, you have to contemplate, think about it, and think about what are the weighed in, what's right and what's wrong. Once you reach that conclusion, you will stick to it because you know it's the right thing. The emotional way, we call it the short and long way. It makes you get excited to be with somebody. It makes you excited to help someone or to show someone what you know and be giving or be able to connect with people. However, that connection is a very short last. You will need to refire. I tell couples that get married that marriage is only the beginning of the journey. Unfortunately, today, in today's world, watching all the movies and all the Netflix, they think that life, all the investment is done up to the marriage. But once they get married, they are committed to each other. They'll always be happy. In truth, we all know you need the romance, you need the relationship, the kind word, the good deeds, you need the special moments, you need the alone time. It's a work in progress throughout. You can be married for 30 years or 40 years. If you don't invest private time with the spouse, if you don't invest in the marriage to show how much you love and care, it's going to fall apart. And that's what happens all around. And the reason is we call it in Kabbalah the short and long route, meaning the connection is made very quick, but you will have to constantly invest in it. Now, I'm not here to downplay one versus the other. I'm not saying that one is bad or not good. They are both needed. However, Chabad, our philosophy, the Alter Rebbe's foundation of Tanya, is the long and short route, the philosophy. That's why this is the source of study for all Hasidim. The other Hasidim are called Chagat. I am called Chabad. What does Chabad stand for? Chokhmah, Bina, Da'at. Wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. We question everything, we discover everything, we learn the reason, and then it motivates us to do the right thing. Chagat, the rest of the Hasidic movement, is Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet. Kindness, strictness, and compassion. It's all in the heart. So all those with the strimals and all those with the bakashe, they wear different garments. They are Hasidim just like me. except that they follow the dance, they follow the Rabbi, they follow happy and be together, which is great. But unfortunately, in today's generation, in the last 2-3 generations, the young generation is constantly striving for reasons. They want to know why. They don't want to take it for granted. So when they lived in the village, if you had questions, they say to you, don't ask. We're going to take care of you. We're going to pay for your wedding. We're going to find you a girl or a boy. We're going to make sure you're happy. You go to work. We'll raise your children even. It's all one big family and everybody is happy. That's called the Chagat. Chagat is Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet. It's the second set of the three. Chabad is the first three on top. They are Chochma Bina Dat. Tanya is all about Chochma Bina Dat. But Tanya is going to talk about Chagat as well. This is the short, long route. So again, when we spoke about last week, the long and short route, or the short and long route, it can be interpreted in many ways. One which is the righteous versus the Baal Teshuva. Another one is versus Chabad versus Chagat. You have coming to an idea or to a conclusion based on my mindset, or coming to an idea because it makes me feel good, or because people will respect me, or people will spend time with me, etc. This is a very, very healthy type of connection, and there is room for it. But to make it a lasting connection, one that don't need to reawaken, refired constantly, we need to go through Chabad. This is what we've studied so far last week. Any questions to this? No questions. Okay. Now, the next, what I'm going to try today, and I'm going to go fast, but we have to study it because it's very important. It is the approbation, the approval from 2 colleagues of the Rabbi. The Rabbi at the time, I'm not going to delve into details, but anyone who's interested can search. The Rabbi at the time received criticism for recording this teaching. As the Rabbi himself, we're going to read his introduction. My goal is to study his introduction, and next week to start the first chapter. The Rabbi points out that Hasidic masters never recorded in writing for many, many reasons, most of which they do not deliver the point as in comparison to when you have a teacher and a student. If I am a teacher and a student came to me with a question or a dilemma, you need to listen and see the person in order for you to assess the proper course of action. You cannot just a computer that spits out a suggestion or a solution. So when the Rebbe printed the Tanya, which is, so to say, to help guide a person in life, some of the students of the previous Rebbe, of the Magid, were very critical, telling him that the Baal Shem Tov did not print any book, the Mezritch Magid did not print any book. Any teachings from the Baal Shem Tov or the Magid of Mezritch, the 2 masters before, they themselves did not record it. It's recorded by their disciples, by their students. And the simple reason is because they didn't feel that putting it in writing and printing it will do justice. When the Rebbe did it, as we'll find out, he was forced to do it for 2 reasons. One is, as we read last week, some people on purpose added mistakes, added typos there to prove that the Rebbe does not follow the Torah. Also, over time, as they copied one from the other, there were many mistakes that were added inadvertently. So the rabbi was forced to publish it officially so that everybody should know that's the right one. When the Rebbe did it, he wouldn't do it unless he got the approval of two of his colleagues, and he chose 2 of them that were very excited and very, very, very much approving of his text, of his printing. So we're going to read their approbation, and then we're going to, hopefully we'll get to the Rebbe's introduction, where at first he brings out all the challenges involved in putting something in writing, and then he addresses them all. Hopefully next week we'll begin chapter 1. So let's start the approbation. If someone needs a book, we have a book here. Text number, page number, I have it in page number 4. I'm sorry, we read the introduction to the approbation. Did we study the approbation? Anybody remembers? We read 5.2, 6. You read 6? Okay. So I'm in the middle of page 5. Approbation by the famous Rabbi and Chassid, a godly man of saintly renown, our teacher, Rabbi Meshulam Zushel of Anipol. He was a very famous rabbi. I have seen the writings of this rabbi and Gaon and a giant, this godly man, saintly and pure, this luminous lance who brings every subject into sharp focus. He, with his own talents, has done well, and moreover, God in his wonderful kindness has placed in his pure heart additional strength to do all this, that is, to write the Tanya, in order to show God's people his holy ways. It was the Alter Rebbe's intention not to publish these writings, for it is not his custom. He did not want to write the Tanya and publish the book, but as I said, he was supposed to. Just a minute so we can stop all the sounds. Let's put it do not disturb. Okay. But because these pamphlets, they were not published, have spread among all Israel in numerous copies by sundry copyists, and as a result of the many and various transcriptions, and the copyist's error has multiplied exceedingly, he was compelled to bring these pamphlets to the printing press. God has aroused the spirit of these two partners, the outstanding and distinguished scholar Rabbi Shalom Shachna and Rabbi Noah, and the outstanding and distinguished scholar Rabbi Mordechai, son of Rabbi Shmuel Halevi, to bring these pamphlets to the printing house in Slavita. I congratulate them on this good deed. They were, however, apprehensive of the growing number of printing established, which are wont to cause damage and ruin to the critical ones. In view of this, we have resolved to give this approbation so that no man shall lift his hand or foot to cause damage, God forbid, to the aforementioned printers by encroaching upon their exclusive right in any manner. It is, I'm going to summarize everything. It is forbidden. We are on page 8. What? It is forbidden to any person to reprint this book without the knowledge of the said printers for a period of 5 full years from the date below. May he who heeds these words of mine be blessed with good. These are the words of one who demands this for the glory of the Torah. This day, Tuesday, the day on which the Creator twice saw it, that it was good, and the weekly portion of Tavor, in the year Kedutenu 556 of the 6th millennia, it is 1796. The insignificant Meshulam Zushel of Anipoli. Let me just summarize what we just studied. We don't want to spend too long. The rabbi is approving of the printing of the book. The Rebbe did not want to print it, but there were too many mistakes for 2 reasons, as mentioned, and therefore he was supposed to put it into print. However, printing was extremely expensive those days, and copyright on printing was questionable at times, and therefore he makes it a very strict prohibition for anyone to copy and print, so that the printers would not incur any financial loss, because if they cannot sell the book because somebody else is competing with them, they would be losing a lot of money. Actually, within 5 years, they had to print it again. As I mentioned, many times it was printed, and the restriction actually applies from the moment the book is finished, is not in store. So even today, nobody is allowed to print a book unless there is an excommunication, as we'll find out soon, for anyone who printed the book, unless the book is out of print and 5 years have elapsed, then someone else might come and print. As is with many books, the Talmud, everybody can print the Talmud. All the commentators, everybody can print the commentators to the Torah, but this Tanya has some restrictions. We're going to go into the next one, the second one. Approbation of the famous Rabbi and Chassid, a godly man, saintly renowned, our teacher, Rabbi Yehuda Leiba Cohen. The wisdom of a man illuminates the face of the earth. When one sees the handwritings of the author, the Rabbi and Gaon, this godly man, saintly and pure, pious and humble, whose hidden powers have been revealed long ago, that is, despite his efforts to the contrary, when he sat at the seat of wisdom with the Lord, with our Lord, Master and Teacher, the world Gaon, that is the Magid of Mezrich, who was the world authority and the revealed aspects of Torah, as well as the supreme authority in the realm of Hasidic thought. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Cohen, this rabbi, knows the Alter Rebbe as he was a very young man by their master, and then everybody knew him to be a giant, a genius. And he drew water from the well of living waters. Some understand this as an allusion to Rabbi Avraham, the angel son of the Magid, from the letters Mibe'er, well, meaning from the well, also spell Avraham. I think I shared with you that the Rebbe had a body to study the Mezritch Magid, his master. The master of all the Hasidic leaders that came after had a son called Abraham, and he assigned the Alter Rebbe to be his chavruta, to be his body to study. So he gained from the son of the Rebbe and the Rebbe himself. Now, Israel, an allusion to Baal Shem Tov, whose name is Israel, will rejoice in the revelation of these holy words. For in Tanya, the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov find lucid intellectual expression. In other words, nobody explained the Baal Shem Tov's teaching as good as the Alter Rebbe, which have been compiled in preparation for the press to teach the nation of God the ways of holiness, as anyone can perceive in the inner meaning of the author's words. That which is common knowledge need no proof, and thus the Tanya would actually need no approbation. But for the fear of damage, so that no harm be caused to the printers, I hereby sound a firm warning that no man raise his hand or foot to print the Tanya for a period of 5 years from the date below. May he who heeds these words of mine be blessed with good. These are the words of one who speaks thus for the glory of the Torah. This day, Tuesday, the weekly portion of Tavo in the year 556. I told you it's 1796 of the 6th millennia, Yehuda Leib Cohen. I just want to point out, they both signed the letter on Tuesday. What's so special about Tuesday? Anybody knows? Double good. When God created the universe, every day, at the end of the day, God saw it was good. On Tuesday, God saw it was good twice. So every time we have an opportunity, we do something on Tuesday. It's a very special day. Number two, they signed it on the portion of Kitavo. Kitavo is going to be in 3 weeks' time. And I think in the first lesson, I shared with you there are 2 reasons. One is there are many curses in that portion, 98 curses. And this book is to prevent those curses. The other one is that portion is acronym for Ketoret, spices, that are the spices to prevent malady or plague. Now we're going to go to the rabbi's son. The rabbi had 3 sons and 3 daughters. I think I shared with you. Those 3 sons have all agreed to print it. This is 10 years after the rabbi passed away. And they added one more part to the Tanya. The Tanya, as we know today, includes 4 sections. The main section that we're going to be studying, the beginning, includes 53 portions, corresponding to 53 portions of the Torah. The 5 books of Moses are divided into 53 portions. Then you have another one, letters for repentance. Another one, last letters, that's the name, Kuntre Sacharon. And another one, Igeret HaKodesh, compilation of letters. All 4 sections made their way later after the rabbi passed away. At first, it was only Lekutei Amarim, only the first part, the 53 chapters. Approbation of the rabbis, long may they live, sons of the illustrious author of blessed memory, whose soul is in Eden. Whereas it has been agreed by us to grant permission and authorization to bring this to the printing press for remembrance for the children of Israel. The written words of the uprightness and truth, words of the living God, as Hasidic discourses are called, the words of living God. That's the way they are called. By our Lord, our Father, Master, and Teacher of blessed memory, recorded personally by his own holy hand in his own saintly expression. whose words are all like burning fiery coals, which ignite people's heart to draw them near to our Father in heaven. These discourses are collectively entitled Igeret HaKodesh, the Holy Epistle, being mostly epistles sent by His Holy Eminence to teach the people of God the way by which they should walk and the deed which they should do. The way probably refers to the Hasidic paths of self-perfection. Those letters offering guidance in attaining love and awe of God and in the proper service of God through prayer and Torah study, while the deed refers to the spiritual letters dealing with charity and the like. So the Rebbe is going to, those added section that they are talking about is letters he sent out to teach people Torah, to teach people how to connect to God, and to teach people how to live their daily life. Inasmuch as our Father had made reference in many places to his book, Likutei Amarim, and since the words of the Torah are scanty in one place and ample in another, so that some subjects in Igeret HaKodesh are most fully elucidated in Likutei Amarim and vice versa, especially also since the Igeret HaKodesh introduces new material pertaining to Likutei Amarim in the form of Kuntres Acharon, later booklet, and certain chapter which he wrote when he composed the Sefer Likutei Amarim. The Kuntres Acharon, the last one, consists of profound discussions and insight in passages of the Zohar, Etz Chaim, and Pri-Etz Chaim, which appear to contradict one another. What the Rabbi is saying, that the Rabbi later on sent out letters explaining parts of the Tanya in a much detailed and broader way. Therefore, they felt it necessary to include. So if someone has difficulty in understanding or studying Tanya, they can refer to the later letters that he sent out later. And in his understanding spirit, the author resolved each passage according to its context as explained in Likutei Amarim, and thus this part of Igeret HaKodesh is certainly directly connected to Likutei Amarim. Accordingly, when we have deemed it proper to join the discourses of Igeret HaKodesh to the Sefer Likutei Amarim and Igeret Teshuva of His Saintly Eminence, our Lord, our Father, Teacher, and Master, that is, to print them together. Therefore, we thereby place a great fence, that is a prohibition, and nachash, neder, cherem, shinui, excommunication of the rabbis, for which there is no remedy, that no man lift his hand to print these discourses in their present form together with the Likutei Amarim, or one without the other, for a period of 5 years from the date below. This, however, must be made known to our misfortune. The manuscripts written by his personal saintly hand, which were composed with great precision, without the superfluous or deficient later, have become extinct. All that has remained from the abundance of material in this small number of writings, which have been collected one by one from the copies spread among the disciples. Should therefore an error be discovered, for who can avoid errors, the obvious error will be identified as deriving from a scribal slip, but the meaning will be clear. Today is the 5th day, Thursday, the 22 of Iyar, the year 574, which is 1814, the 6th millennium. So in 1814, it's about 18 years later, they published and added 2 more sections, so it's a total of 4 sections. And the reason is, as they explain, that there are many points that the Rabbi is making in the first part of Tanya that are not 100% clear, but studying the letters, he elaborates and goes through details and vice versa. The other points they make is there are many mistakes, some of them just printing typo, but hopefully people will be able to understand them. By the way, there are many corrections over the years. They found lots of mistakes, even though they try, check, and recheck. There is a whole list of corrections that were made. And I don't believe, I think I told you in 1900 in Vilna, they printed the first time that it is the same print that continues until today. I believe they corrected up to there, and from there and on, all the corrections are added in the back of the book. We do not change the form. declared. Now there are 3 rabbis that are going to sign. There is a slight distinction the way they describe their father. The first one was the Rabbi of Chabad at the time, so he adds many titles. The second one omits one title, and the third one omits another title. The Rabbi points out in the note later, you'll see on the bottom, you'll see the Rabbi says he has no idea why. Declared by Dovber. Dovber is the name of the second Chabad rabbi. The son of my Lord, father, teacher, and master, Gaon and Hasid, state of Israel, our teacher and master, Shneur Zalman, of blessed memory, whose soul rests in the hidden treasures house in heaven. Now the second one, declared also by Chaim Abraham, the son of my Lord, father, teacher, and master, Gaon of Hasid, our teacher and master, Shneur Zalman, may his memory of the Tzadik be blessed, whose soul rests in hidden treasures, houses of heaven. And the third one, declared also by Moshe, the son of my Lord, father, teacher, and master, Gaon and Hasid, Shneur Zalman, of blessed memory, whose soul rests in the hidden treasures, houses of heaven. So we have 3 rabbis, all three sons, all 3 agreed to add to the Tanya and printed together and gave a warning for 5 years after the last book is gone from the print house. Now, all the mistakes are listed in the back of the book. Good question. So,
it's up to date. The print one is up to date. Leave them in the back.
Yes, Dick.
Could it be because they don't want to suppress it once they allow instructions to become part of the main text? Other people may go from there and go, well, this wasn't quite right here, so we'll make that change. Before you know, we have string changes.
That might be a good answer, except there are some typos that we know for sure that are mistakes. This is a Tanya. We're all going to be Hasidim here tonight. So from now on, so I'm going to share with you the Hasidic answer. The Torah God gave us as the written part and the oral tradition, right? The Torah is set. Can you change the Torah? Do you know there are many parts of Torah the way it's written is not the way we read? Do you know that? You don't know that. And word, not just pronounce, a different word altogether. There are places in the Torah, there is one Ishgalena, we say Ishkavena. Bat Chorim, we change it to Ba'apolim. I know it by heart because I'm reading, so I need to know it. There are words in the Torah that written Tav, Chet, Reish, Yud, Mem, and you read it, Ain, Pei, Lamed, Yud, Mem. Totally different meaning. And the reason is because there are 2 realms to the Torah, the written Torah. One, the way it's on the parchment, and the one is on our heart. Simple as that. In addition, there are hundreds of places in the Torah where someone who is versed in the holy language would read it totally different than the way we read it. There are words that are missing letters, and they have totally different meaning, and yet we read it differently. That's called minor changes. In the Talmud, that's the written Torah. The written Torah, you have the parchment, you stick to it, you know it's not mistakes. You know the way Moshe wrote it is one way, and the way Moshe read it is a different way. Then you have the Mishnah in the Talmud. The Mishnah in the Talmud, endless argument, right? There is one Mishnah in the entire Talmud that has no argument, and we say it every morning. Izeu Mekoman. It's an entire chapter. Anybody who come to morning prayers before prayer, we study Mishnah. It's a chapter with 6 Mishnahs. There is no argument, and that's why it made it to the prayer, because it's the only time you don't find opposing opinions. Everything else, there is no agreement. According to Hasidic teaching, the Tanya is the Bible of Hasidic teaching. He has combined the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov and Mezritch Maggid and the Arizal. And by the way, the thing is, what's fascinating, all the other Hasidim oppose Chabad in many, many ways, and they conduct themselves differently. Of course, it's the nuances, not Torah, or mitzvot. They dress differently, they pronounce words differently, they celebrate differently holidays, yet there is nothing similar to the Tanya, not even close, because Chabad is the only one who came to the Chabad, the philosophy. They go to Chagat. And therefore, they all agree that this is the Bible of the Hasidic teaching. If it's the Bible, the way you see it, that's the way it's going to be.
So who is the actual author?
The Alter Rebbe. But he says he compiled it, only one person, right? The only one, yes. Satmar, you know Satmar. They break windows, they throw rocks at the Rebbe's house. Yet at the same time, they printed the Tanya. In 1977, there was a major war going on. They printed their own Tanya without permission. They crossed the line with this prohibition, with this approbation. But that's beside the point. They've done a lot of wrong things, but they study Tanya. When I meet a Hasidic Rosh Yeshiva, Dean of Yeshiva of not Chabad, right away I talk to them about Tanya, and they say, "Oh, we love Tanya. We study Tanya. Oh, Sameach, teach Tanya." They are not Hasidic movements. They are Lithuanian. They study the Tanya. You are into a treat for your life. It's just that you have to be a little patient, and you have to realize that this is something that will change our entire life. Maybe not so easy at first. They're not funny comedy here. There is no fascinating stories, but we will get to the essence of what life is about. Our relationship with others, with God. These are things that are very fascinating. Let's talk about the introduction. We're doing good timing. We are on page 17. Compilers forward. So I want to share with you beforehand a summary of the compiler, which is the Rabbi, when he agreed after 5 years of being circulating those letters, and a lot of typos showed up, some on purpose, some by mistake of copying. The rabbi realized he has to put it in writing and printed. He is going to break, the introduction is going to be divided into two components. One is finding all the reasons why it's not a good idea. The second part is addressing all the issues that the rabbi can bring against printing. I hope my goal is to finish all the introduction today, all this part. As we have seen from the title page, the Alter Rebbe perceives himself as a mere compiler rather than as an author. He calls it the compiler's forward. In reality, there is no other book printed since that is teaching something new that is not written somewhere else or compiled from other sources. But yet he calls it the compiler. Being a letter sent to all Anash is an acronym, members of our fellowship, that is the Hasidim. May God, our stronghold, bless and guard them. To you, worthy men, do I call. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, who seek God, and may the Almighty listen to you, both great in spiritual stature and small. All Anash in our land and in nearby countries. May each in his own place achieve peace and eternal life. Amen. May this be his will. So this is the introduction, so to say, we call it small talk to get into the point. It is well known that all Anash, all Hasidim, are wont to say that hearing words of moral guidance from teacher addressing his student individually and directly is not the same as seeing and reading such guidance in books, which are impersonal and addressed to the reading audience at large. So the first rabbi is saying, when a teacher is speaking to a student, he tailors it to the individual student according to their need. How quick are they to understand? How many examples they need? What is really the issue that they are faced with? Where when you put it in writing, what you do is you're trying to address to the masses. You are taking the average person and you're writing the book for the average person. What happened to that who's a much slower learner? What about the person who is much more advanced? They're going to find it boring. So that's number one, a major issue in writing, guidance, and teaching. Another one, the first, for the reader who gains such instruction in books will read it after his own manner and mind, and will absorb the written messages according to his mental grasp and comprehension at that particular time. And therefore, hence, if his intellect and mind are confused and wander about in darkness in ideas pertaining to the service of God, you will find it difficult to see the beneficial light hidden in the books. Although this light will be pleasant to the eyes and healing for the soul. What the Rabbi is saying is that if you are reading a book, it's all about your state of mind, your mindset. If I'm tired, if I have destruction around me, I cannot read it and absorb the essence of the idea. In addition, someone's mindset is totally absorbed with different ideas, and therefore they cannot connect. They don't understand, makes no sense. So when writing something, it's a much harder way to connect. In the case of personal guidance, on the other hand, the mentor can ensure that his message is understood fully and correctly. The Alter Rebbe now points out a second disadvantage in writing advice. By its very nature, its ability to inspire even the understanding reader is restricted to a specific audience. A book does not allow for the subjective differences between one reader's character and another's. It will, of necessity, leave some of its readership untouched. That's the second point. When you write a book, you write it to the average person. What about the more advanced students? What about the one that's behind? They cannot connect and they're left behind. The Alter Rebbe next distinguishes between two categories of inspirational books. In those books belonging to the first category, this problem is more obvious and acute. In those of the second category, less so. The first category embraces those books that argue for pious conduct on grounds of human intellect. These will surely not affect all readers equally, owing to the diversity of mind and temperament among readers. What profoundly inspires one reader will leave another indifferent. When I talk about intellectual philosophy, some people are attached to it, they connect with it. Some people are totally indifferent to it. It doesn't mean anything to them. That's the way God created human beings, that we are not all the same. So what inspires me, what connects me to the idea, as we know, everybody goes to college, but everybody goes for a different reason. Some go for politics, some goes for finances, some go for computer science, some go for medicine. You can't expect someone who is musical in nature to go and study medicine. It's just not going to work, and math, vice versa. So when you put an advice about life in a book, it eliminates a lot of prospects. The second category comprises those works founded on the teachings of our sages. It would seem at first glance that in such books the problem of subjective differences between readers will be irrelevant, since they are based on Torah, which is pertinent to every Jew without exception. Surely every Jew could be guided and inspired by them. You can say, well, if he's teaching Torah, Torah is applicable to all Jews, and therefore everybody must find a part of Torah that he connects to. The Alter Rebbe points out, however, that not every Jew is privileged to find his place in Torah and to derive the inspiration applicable to him as an individual. Thus, the problem still obtains, though to a lesser degree. Now the Rabbi is going to go on to say, even if it's Torah teaching, and every Jew has a part in Torah and must study Torah, It doesn't mean that we connect to every part of the Torah. Some people connect to one section of Torah, while others connect to another. In fact, there is a mitzvah for a father and mother who are obligated to teach their son and daughter Torah to make sure to find the section that is applicable for their children. So you have one child who loves to study the book of sacrifices, another one loves to study of Joseph in the book of Genesis, and the third one wants to hear about fighting the wars in the book of Deuteronomy. You need to connect based on the level of the person. You cannot just tell somebody, this is the philosophy of Torah, and therefore you must connect to it. Aside from this aforementioned possibility that the reader's intellectual shortcoming may prevent them from perceiving the light concealed in the holy books, there is yet another difficulty. Now the rabbi is bringing another challenge in printing a book, in putting advice in a book. Those books on piety founded on human intelligence surely do not affect all people equally. Even if you make it very pleasant, the fact that it's intellectual, everybody is affected intellectually differently. So some people relate to it, some people don't. Those books, and the intellect of one man is not affected and aroused by that which affects and arouses the intellect of another. As our sages have said in reference to the blessing of he who is wise in secret, ordained by the sages to be recited on witnesses a gathering of 600,000 Jews, whereby we praise God's omniscience in knowing the secrets of them all. Why? For their minds, that is, their thoughts, opinions, and feelings, are all different from one another. We have a mitzvah. If you see 600,000 men in one gathering, there is a special blessing. What's the blessing? God, who is in infinite magical wisdom, was able to create so many unique mindsets. In other words, when you see a herd of 600,000 donkeys or 600,000 camels, you don't make that blessing, because they all think pretty much the same. They want to find hay. They want to fight or flight. That's it. There is no uniqueness. It's that even though they are unique, some say that their face, there is like fingerprints, prints that are unique to each animal. But at the end of the day, they are all the same. They have the same nature. In addition, they don't improve. The way the llama or the chicken live today is the same way they lived 3,000 years ago. If I were taken back and take a picture from a rooster or from a wolf that lives 4,000 years ago, and today they prey on the same animals, they live in the same prairies, the same mountains, they didn't change much. Human being, you take a man from before, he lived in a cave. He didn't have an elevator and he didn't have a haircut. They had lived totally different. We keep improving. Now we fly on planes. We can also read the DNA of a person. We can identify a person to his parents. There are many, many advancements because we are unique. So therefore, how is it plays out in the mitzvah that if you see so many men together, men, women, it doesn't matter, you thank God for being so magical that although we have faces, the features are the same, yet each one of us think differently. Why is it so crucial to live in a Jewish life? Because first, you cannot force your child to follow your path. People ask me, for example, is your son going to be a rabbi? I say to him, I wish my son will do what he wants to do. Because if he does what I want to do, I have taken away his freedom. I've taken away the creativity from him. My daughter or my son should live their own life and trailblaze their own path. That's the uniqueness of the human being. So therefore, as the Rabbi, if I am teaching a student or I'm listening to a teacher, there is a relationship. So the teacher or the student can adjust himself. If the student is tired or the student does not grasp, he can say, can you slow down? If the teacher is very advanced, he can say, I know it. Let's move on before I get tired. But when you put it in writing, It's impossible for 600,000 men who are reading the book and all to gain something from it, because maybe many of them will, but not all of them. Therefore, there is a great deficiency in putting in writing. He goes on. I'm going to give you the introduction to the next section so we can move on. The Torah tells us that Moses, upon his death, he asked for God to appoint a leader. You know how he calls that leader? He says, appoint a man that can connect with all of the people, with 600,000 men. And he says to God, surely there isn't anybody. You can't have someone who can accommodate 600,000 men, especially if they're Jewish. And what does God say to him? Joshua. And I will imbue him with the power to be able to connect with all. By the way, at first when Joshua became a leader, the elders were disrespecting him. Anybody is familiar with that? You know that? They mocked him down because he was he was a shofar of Moshe. He only knew how to drive the donkey, to ride the donkey of Moses. He wasn't teaching Torah. You won't find him teaching much. He wasn't there inspiring. He was connected with Moshe. He never left Moshe. And God says, this is the man deserving to be the next leader. He then tells Moshe, he then tells Moshe, take a stick and hit on the heads of the elders until they obey Joshua. If they don't, tell them they have no choice. And actually, we find that as soon as he crossed the Jordan, which took maybe 40 days, everybody respected him and he became the leader for many, many years. He was a great leader. And the reason is because God gave him a very unique power to be able to understand and connect with all of the Jewish people. This is unique to Joshua. Other people, you can't expect them to do that. How much more so when you put it in writing and expect it to be thought by many. Okay, David, you can ask your question. I have a question. In my mind, Torah was never changed. And therefore, and if it is forbidden to change Torah, how it is that some words are read completely different from that was written. The answer is it was never changed. These are the changes that were given by Moses. No man was allowed to do it, but Moshe himself. I hope it helps you. It's not a change that came about later on. Let's continue. Here is the rabbi, he's talking about Joshua. So too, does Rambam of blessed memory explain the reason for the blessing of this in his Milchamot, in his book, elaborating on the comment of Sifri and the verse describing Joshua as a man in whom there is spirit. God said, I place spirit within Joshua so that he will be the only one who can accommodate all Jewish people. By the way, even Moses, nobody agreed with him. You know, they almost stoned him to death. His own cousin was fighting him. So it's a very challenging situation to get an entire group to all be able to be inspired from a book, let alone how much more so if not from a person. Sifri explains that he was able to meet the spirit of every man, but even those works of Musar, whose foundation is in the peaks of holiness, meaning that they are founded on the medrashim of our sages, in whom the Spirit of God speaks, and his word is on their tongues. Even in the case of such works, the aforementioned problem obtains. For although the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be he, are one, and all 600,000 general souls of Israel, and the individual souls that are their offshoots, down to even the soul sparks residing within the most worthless and least estimable members of our people, the children of Israel, are all bound up with the Torah, and the Torah is what binds them to God, as is known in the Holy Zohar. And since the Torah does contain what is pertinent to every Jew, those works founded and the Torah ought to appeal to every Jewish reader. Yet this is said in a general way for the Jewish people as a whole. The statement of the Zohar speaks of the bond between Jewry in general with the Torah in its entirety. It does not refer to a particular Jew seeking individual instruction in a specific area in the Torah. And it is true that the Torah lends itself to interpretation by the rule of general principles and specific applications, and these applications may be further broken down to even more specific details to apply to each individual soul in Israel rooted in the Torah. Thus, the Torah contains not only general instructions for the nation as a whole, but also specific instruction for each individual. Therefore, despite subjective differences between people, every Jew could theoretically find in such works instruction pertinent to his circumstances. Yet, not every man is privileged to recognize his specific place in the Torah so that he may know how to derive specific guidance from it. Says the Rabbi, even though the Torah is applicable to every Jew, every individual has one section of Torah that is connected to him. Not everyone can find that section. And they are searching. While they're searching, this is boring, this does not talk to me, has no meaning, until they reach to a point, hopefully one day they find a section. Tanya, by the way, will address, the Rabbi is giving you all the reasons why a book will serve no purpose. Even in Torah laws governing things forbidden and permissible, which have been revealed to us and to our children equally, for despite the differences between generations, the law applies equally to all, complete objectivity prevailing. Even in these laws, we witness arguments from one extreme to the other between Tanaim and Amorim, with one Tana, for instance, declaring perfectly permissible that which another Tana rules absolutely forbidden. And yet, these as well as those are the words of the living God. The Rabbi said even Jewish law is applicable to all Jews. There is no philosophy there. It's how you celebrate Shabbat, and what's kosher and not, and how you celebrate holiday. These are very simple laws. Yet, if you read in Code of Law, you will see there is an argument. Rabbis will argue and argue and argue until we come to a conclusion, but you see that there are different opinions, and we call them all God's words. In other words, even the opinion that we do not follow is considered part of Torah. We did not omit it from the Torah. And the reason, and the Rabbi explains why. And by the way, there are many laws that today we follow one rabbi, and when Mashiach arrives, what will happen? It will be reversed. Anybody heard about that? Shammai and Hillel. Very good. We're going to find out. The rabbi is going to give us a reason. In other words, we have an argument how to celebrate Hanukkah. How do we celebrate Hanukkah? We light one candle when? First night. How many second night? 2. How many third night? 3. Do you know that this is only one opinion? What's the other opinion? 8, because you have 8 days to celebrate. 7, second night you do 7 because you have 7 days to celebrate. Third night you do 6 because you have 6 days to remind us how many days to celebrate. Whose opinion is that? Shammai. The first opinion is, who's a greater scholar from the two? Shammai was a far greater scholar. And by the way, there is no dispute between Shammai and Hillel. There are no disputes in Shammai and Hillel. There is Beit Shammai and Bet Hillel. The house of study of Shammai, the house of study of Hillel. Hillel and Shammai were good buddies. They never argued. It was the students who argued. And we side with Hillel, not because Hillel was a great, Bet Hillel, we followed the yeshiva of Hillel because they were much kinder and compassionate people. The house of study of Shammai were very strict, mean people because they were great scholars and they felt that everybody has to obey them. The Jewish people followed Hillel. We are told that what happens when Mashiach will arrive? We reverse the law. We follow Shammai in all because it is much closer to God's desire. So what you see is, even though you have Hillel and Shammai, both are, by the way, Shabbat, holiday, kosher, everything is filled with argument. We follow law, Jewish law. You cannot say, oh, there is another opinion that agrees with me. This is called going against God. We must follow halacha, which is accepted by all Jews in one way. Anyone who is not, does not follow Jewish way. However, it needs to be clear that the opinion that's not accepted is part of Torah. And you cannot study it without saying the blessing for studying Torah first. And someone is rewarded for studying that Torah. And in addition, many of the opinions later on will be reversed. We will follow the second opinion. And today, the fact that today we follow one way doesn't mean that it's going to be so forever. Let's just finish. We are already over time. I see that we didn't even finish. All right, so we'll stop right here and continue next week. Thank you for being good students. We'll see you next week, God willing. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.